Hello, and welcome back to another edition of The End Game, a podcast that's been developed for senior lab executives by senior lab executives. My name is Melissa Butterworth, and I am your proud host of the End Game podcast. First of all, I'd like to say happy Easter holiday weekend to everybody, and I would really like to thank our guest for joining us today. Not only is he someone that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, he is a colleague, he is a fellow entrepreneur, and I am just super excited. I know that our guests are going to learn a lot of valuable information today, and I would like to welcome John David Klipp. Good morning.
Good morning, Melissa, and thanks for thanks for inviting me to this program.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to say a special thanks to John David Klipp. We actually did this podcast a few weeks ago and had a little technical difficulties, and he was just so gracious to come back today and give us 30 more minutes of his time. So thank you so much for that. And before we jump into today's podcast, I'd like to give a little fun fact. And this was something I learned about John David a few weeks ago. It really spoke to my heart because I learned he is also an animal lover. I don't know if he was a born animal lover, but I know that his wife certainly loves cats, and she had a cat when they met 35 years ago, but now they actually have 5 cats, which I find absolutely amazing because I also have 5 cats. So I think it's fun, especially for all of you animal lovers out there. So John David, welcome again. And, today's topic is going to be something that is very near and dear to my heart because as the founder of Advanced Strategic Partners, which is a laboratory M&A firm, we over the last 18 months have pivoted because a lot of things have been changing in the marketplace, and we have pivoted and moved more into working with very large hospital systems at whether or not they should potentially divest of their outreach laboratories. And John David is someone that has a lot of information and expertise in this area. And so today we're going to be talking about, if you are a hospital executive, should you consider potentially selling your outreach? Should you consider potentially at least getting an idea of what you have in your hands, the value of your laboratory assets? And so without further ado, John David, I am going to open up today and ask you to share just a little bit about your background with today's audience before we jump into a few of the questions that I have.
Sure. So in brief, I have been covering the clinical lab and anatomic pathology lab businesses for almost 30 years, right near 30 years. And I started my first job in introduction into the lab business was working for G2 Reports, which was back in the late 90s. I think I started, and I worked there for 7 years and wrote some of their two of their newsletters and some of their started their research report division. And then in 2006, I left to create my own company, Laboratory Economics, and we published a monthly newsletter and a few different market research reports, and that's been almost, I think, 19 years ago, and it's been interesting, and I think I learn something every day, something new every day.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you do not subscribe to John David's Laboratory Economics, I can attest as a subscriber that it is amazing. It is so informative, and it really helps me keep ahead of the trends that are going on in the industry. So thank you for that. And we also share that in common, by the way. We're both entrepreneurs who started our companies about the same time. I think I'm going on 19 to 20 years, and it sounds like you are too. So we're at a great point in our career, and your knowledge that you have shared has been really informative to our team. So thank you for that. And so let's jump right into today's podcast about hospitals, right? If you're a hospital executive tuning in today, you're not going to want to miss this. I'd like to start off by asking you, John David, what are some of the recent transactions that have been occurring in the industry in regards to the hospital outreach transactions?
Sure. So what's happened is over the past 5 years, or since the pandemic, really, it put a lot of pressure. The pandemic put a lot of pressure on, although there was a tremendous amount of COVID-19 PCR testing, which gave all labs a big boost. In the aftermath of the pandemic, there's been a lot of employee salary and benefit inflation, very significant, and it's put a lot of pressure on hospital system budgets. And as a result, a lot of health systems, not a lot, but a number of health systems have chosen to sell their outreach businesses. And the purchase of outreach businesses by Quest or LabCorp over the past 10 or 15 years, there was always one or two deals done per year. Sometimes no deals were done per year. But in more recent years, because of the financial pressure and the employee wage and benefit inflation, I think in 2022, I believe there were 6 transactions, or Quest and LabCorp together acquired 6 different health system or hospital lab outreach businesses. Another 6 were acquired in 2023, and then another 6, I believe, if I have that correct, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, and another 6 were completed in 2024. So going from a pretty sleepy business where there might be 0 or 1 or 2 at the most transactions, the past 3 years there's been 6 transactions, and some of these are very large. The largest was LabCorp's acquisition of the outreach labs of Accession Health. Other big ones have been the Alina Health sale to Quest Diagnostics. That was $230 million transaction. And one more, another 200 plus transaction was Quest's acquisition of Ohio Health for $200 million late last year. So it's not clear if it's not 100% clear if this trend is going to continue. Maybe as the health systems get their financials in better shape, maybe it'll slow down a bit. But as of right now, it seems to be going pretty strong. And Quest and LabCorp are both aggressively seeking out these types of hospital outreach acquisitions.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really great overview. I have to say, John David, that our firm, we are currently involved in a number of very, very large hospital outreach transactions that I'm very confident will go through, and they'll be announced throughout 2025. So I am also seeing that this trend is continuing. And we expect from an M&A side, based on what you're saying, based on what we've seen, based on the history, based on who we're talking to in the industry, we're expecting it to continue in the direction of what we've seen over the last couple of years. We've sat down with a lot of the buying entities, top level executives, and this is a primary focus for them. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And, having just gone through myself, unfortunately, I lost my precious father, and I got to see firsthand what it was like for him when he was in the hospital. And, the continuity of care is it's gotten pretty crazy, right? And so I like seeing these deals because I think that it helps streamline healthcare. I think it helps with continuity of care, taking care of the patient. There's just a lot of, positives that go along with these transactions. And it's just not the transaction themselves, but it really does, in my mind, help patient care. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what are you seeing? Like, what are the typical attitudes of the CEOs and the CFOs of these health systems when it comes to potentially divesting of their lab operations? And I'll share with you what I'm seeing, but I'd love to see what your thoughts are on that.
Sure. So, for better or worse, a lot of health system CEOs and CFOs, and those are the people that the decision ultimately winds down to, a lot of the health system CEOs and CFOs don't view their laboratory as a core business line. And as a matter of fact, I went to a Quest conference, a Quest Diagnostics conference a few weeks ago, and the CEO there said that You'll never see a health system, or very rarely see a health system bragging about their laboratory outreach services. The more prominent and advertisable services are cancer centers and heart transplant centers, pediatric care centers. These are the types of things that get the most attention. So again, for better or worse, a lot of the health systems executives at the very top don't see the laboratory as a key core service, which again might be a mistake, but that's the way they see it. And when you add on top of that financial pressure, if the sale of the outreach lab can bring in 100 or 200 or more $1 million, and there's the health system is experiencing serious financial pressure, and you have Quest and LabCorp knocking on your door every few weeks with attractive cash prices. I could see why, over the past few years, there's been more deals than usual, and as you mentioned, the pipeline, which you have better insight into than I do, the pipeline is not diminishing.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I'll share with you kind of what we have seen in some of the deals that we're currently working with. We've seen that the hospital, like senior executive team, they really have no idea what they have when it comes to laboratory, and they don't really understand the difference between inpatient versus outpatient. What does that really mean, right? What does it mean when you say outpatient lab testing? They don't really have an idea. And a lot of them have not, like you said, it's not their core competency. It's not their focus. They haven't put any energy and any effort and any financial resources towards expansion of their hospital outreach. So I think, and to give you a little bit more information about that, a lot of them don't even really know whether or not what they have is profitable, right? So they don't know what they have, and then they don't understand if what they have is even profitable. And that's something that our team, all of our team comes from the laboratory industry. We actually go in and we help provide them with a full assessment of what it is that they have and what it is that they have in the hands of an acquirer. Because a lot of times we'll see the health system, they'll look at the books and they'll say, well, we have $100 million worth of revenue. This should be very attractive to a buyer, when in reality, that $100 million worth of revenue in the hands of an acquirer may look very, very different. And it does look very, very different because hospitals tend to have much more aggressive and attractive contracts with the payers than the acquirers do. So that's something that really takes a lot of finesse for somebody to be able to come in and be able to provide that kind of feedback to a hospital organization so that they can make those tough decisions about whether or not they should divest of their lab operation. So I think to your point, a lot of them, it's not their core competency. They don't know what they have. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about this, is that I love going in and doing those assessments and helping them understand what it is that they have. So
yeah, and I would yeah, absolutely. And what you just mentioned probably applies to the vast majority of hospital outreach labs, although there are a handful, maybe a few dozen across the country where it is considered a core competency, and it is a focus of the health system. And they have because of that, they have developed very successful lab outreach programs. I mean, there's Northwell Health in the New York City area, and Sonora Quest in Arizona, and Alverno Clinical Labs in Indiana. And there's, like I said, probably a few dozen others. Central DuPage Hospital in the Midwest, extremely successful. So, there are a few dozen, I would say, very successful, very profitable, high growth, hundreds of millions of dollars. Some of them have hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. But for the vast majority of hospital outreach labs, they're kind of neglected, and the financials are very sketchy, not kept track of very well. And again, if the health system's in financial trouble, they could be candidates for a potential sale.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what do you think's holding back? I mean, like, if this is such a great trend and so many of these systems are looking for ways to raise capital, what do you think's holding some of the systems back from considering the alternative of what to do with their lab operations?
Okay, so I think that some of the things that might be holding them back are, I can think of two things off the top of my head. One would be, as you mentioned, the hospital labs get get paid much higher reimbursement rates from commercial payers than Quest or LabCorp do. So for Quest or LabCorp, an Aetna or United Healthcare or Cigna might be paying them at a discount to the Medicare fee schedule reimbursement rates. For if you're a hospital, you're more likely than not getting a substantially more than the Medicare clinical lab fee schedule rates, and so you have the hospital getting paid these really uh, attractive reimbursement rates, and you have that would need to be adjusted downward into the rates that Quest or LabCorp get, and that could be a sticking point because the hospital lab might view their lab outreach program as more substantial, but in the hands of a Quest or LabCorp, it's because of the discount they're going to have to transfer to because of the discounted reimbursement rates. There could be a difference in the values that each one thinks the lab is worth. That's one thing. And then the second thing I think that can be a roadblock is the pathologists. So the pathologists, whether they're employed by the hospital or contracted to provide professional services to the hospital, are generally very leery and a little suspicious of having, they've been the big banana at the lab as medical lab directors and the decision makers, and you could see where the pathologists might be a little bit leery of having a third party come in and suddenly they're making some of the decisions and some of the volumes are being transferred over to a Quest or a LabCorp. So I would say the difference in the reimbursement rates that commercial payers pay can be a roadblock. And the second thing would be convincing the contracted or employed pathologists that that this isn't going to greatly impact their way their business and their leadership or control of the laboratory. I would say those would be two things.
That is like, I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, I have to say, in the deals that we're working on, they've been very, very tight-lipped, and they have not included the pathologist in their decision making. I know that's probably going to be something that will end up being a little troublesome down the road for them, but it's really kind of at a board level where they're looking at things and they're making assessments. I mean, I would 100% agree with you when you start bringing in, a lot of different people to help with the decision making. A lot of those decisions don't get made, right? Because there's too many political things that, that it's going to cause within the system. But you bring up some really, really great points. I know that you and I could talk all day long about, the hospital outreach and lab management, and it's just such a hot topic right now. I would say to our viewers who have tuned in, if you all would like to get or subscribe to John David's Laboratory Economics, feel free to reach out to John David or myself. I'm at M18 Butterworth at Advanced Strategic Partners with an S.com. And John David, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you as well?
So directly by email, and my email is jklipp@laboratoryeconomics.com.
Yeah, no, I really, really thank you for that. And if anybody is tuned in today and they would like to have an assessment of their lab operations, feel free to reach out to me and my team at Advanced Strategic Partners with an S.com. And once again, it's M18 Butterworth at advancedstrategicpartners.com. And I sincerely hope that you all have enjoyed today's episode. John David, would you like to give our viewers any more kind of final tidbits about outreach or anything that you would like to conclude with.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to be quick. So in addition to outright sales of the outreach labs, another strategy that both Quest and LabCorp have come up with over the past few years has been to sign lab outsourcing deals, and Quest has called these professional lab service contracts, and Quest has now rebranded that as collab, sort of collaboratory laboratory agreements. They recently rebranded, and these would be where Quest would come in and provide supply chain management, take over the instrument purchasing and reagent purchasing as those contracts at the hospital come up for renewal. Typically, they also involve some outsourcing of non-time sensitive testing to the nearest Quest or LabCorp laboratory. The agreements are typically 7-year agreements, so it's not an asset sale, but a contract. And this is another area where both Quest and LabCorp have been have been pursuing over the past few years. And as a matter of fact, Quest has recently said that in 2024, their revenue from PLS, now collab agreements, was it's actually $880 million in 2024, and they expect it to increase to over $1 billion in revenue from these outsourcing contracts by the end of this year, which would represent somewhere around 10% of Quest's overall revenue. So this is another area where Quest and LabCorp are trying to get their foot into the door of the hospital lab business.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you, because that is a really critical area, and that is an option, right? It's not just a one size fits all. I mean, if you've seen one deal, you've seen one deal, right? And there's many potential solutions, and I think that is key. So I really appreciate you bringing that up today. Appreciate you joining. And to our viewers who have tuned in today, if you would like to go back and listen to this podcast, you can go to our website at www.advancedstrategicpartners.com. It's also under YouTube under The End Game by Melissa Butterworth, and or Spotify if you're somebody that likes to listen on your way to work. So thank you again for tuning in. John David, thank you so much for coming today and being a guest. I hope you have a wonderful Easter, and until next episode, I look forward to talking to our viewers. Have a great day, everybody.